Welcome, everybody. As always, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask in the chat. If you think you might like to join me one week and come on the show yourself, please do get in contact. My details on the Channels About page. Next week, we'll be talking with Carrie Sundra from Alpenglow Industries. But today's guest is Andrew Tierney, aka Cyber Gibbons. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing? How are you doing? All good?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
Good, nice. So as always, I like to start with people's background, where you came from and how you got to where you are today. So are you happy to start talking about sort of your childhood antics?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
It's a long story. So I guess as a teenager, I was into a few different things. Electronics was one of them. I lived at the school I went to, and they used to throw out equipment all of the time. So quite a lot of the time it was boring stuff, lights, light fittings, computers, but there's also like scientific equipment and crazy stuff. Oscilloscopes, like valve oscilloscopes. I remember I had a collection of valve oscilloscopes, which some of them, like the chassis was at like 200 volts DC as well, which gave me a real exciting tickle if you touched it. But yeah, I was really into electronics as a teenager, just like making contraptions and things like that. I think the other thing I was into as a teenager was urban exploration. So like visiting disused buildings and taking photos of them and just kind of wandering about. And that kind of went into like my mid-20s, to be honest, which was all good fun. But yeah, next stage of my life was going to university. So I did electronic engineering, which wasn't as much like hands-on stuff as I expected. I was kind of, I thought it would be making things, designing circuits and things like that, but it turned out it was mostly maths. Like it wasn't bad, but it wasn't what I expected. Lots of theory, yeah.
Okay.
When I came out of university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I'd done a few kind of summer placements during uni, but none of them were really the direction I wanted to go in. So I set up a business with my best friend from school, doing IT consultancy. That went okay.
Is that the sort of things supporting small businesses in the area, that kind of thing, or?
Yeah. Some interesting experiences on that front. Yeah, we unplugged Friends Reunited once.
Ooh, well done.
I don't know, like I don't know how old the audience is here, or if like people know what Friends Reunited was. It could have been Facebook.
Yeah,
but they cocked it up.
Did you unplug them?
Yeah, they were in a data center up at Biggin Hill Airport, and we used to do a lot of work on other servers up there. And we were in there one day migrating a server from some small disks through to big disks, and my mate tripped over the cable. This data center was an absolute mess. I'm not going to name the company, but I know people know who it is. Tripped over the cable coming out the floor. It was either 10 or 100 megabit Ethernet, and he pulled it out the floor. And he was like, he looked down, and I think there was 4 sockets in the floor, and we didn't know which one it was.
Lucky dip.
Until the link lights came on the other end. And it turned out that was Friends Reunited, with all 4,000 users or something had back in those days. But
nice.
It was good fun. But yeah, it didn't make much money. Then oddly, I decided I wanted to go to sea to work as an engineer. So again, one of the things I've always liked doing is like working on cars, fixing stuff and things like that. So I like mechanical work. And my dad had worked at sea. My dad worked on ships in engine rooms back in the 60s, a long time ago. And he had loads of stories to tell. And like, I kind of wanted stories to tell as well. So I thought I'd train to be a marine engineer. So I did that with a container ship company, P&O Ned Lloyd. So it's like a Dutch-British kind of conglomerate back then. And went up to Glasgow, trained how to be an engineer, and then went to sea for a bit, working on, the really, really big container ships that you see going about. That
I'm
was
sure a lot
great.
of people have seen your talks, but we're talking stand inside the engine cylinders sort of size, aren't we?
Yeah,
it's the big stuff.
Yeah, a meter across, 2.4 meters stroke for the it's absolutely massive things. They're great fun. I love that scale of engineering. And to be honest, most of the time I liked the work in the engine room. There were times when it just got like repetitive or scary or just like really unpleasant. But most of the time it was work that I kind of enjoyed.
Did you gather any stories like your dad? Are there any particular good ones that you might like to reminisce about now?
I mean, we had some really good ones. I mean, I think one of the ones that sticks in my head the most was we had a fuel leak.
Right.
So the main engine's powered by something called HFO, heavy fuel oil. You heat it up to, I can't remember, maybe 180 degrees to get it to a viscosity that you can pump it around pipes. Right. And 180 degrees is, that's not a pleasant temperature. But to stop the main engine solidifying in terms of fuel, you pump a very, very tiny amount of that very hot fuel around it all of the time. Okay. It's called recirc. It's just a tiny little pipe carrying hot fuel, 8 millimeters in diameter, compared to the fuel pipe that's normally we're talking like 10 centimeters in diameter.
Okay. Yeah.
One night that little recirc pipe backed off on one of the fuel injectors and started spraying fuel out on top of the main engine.
I imagine that's at pressure as well, presumably.
Yeah, so it's a kind of 8 to 10 bar. It's not injected pressure, but it's enough
high enough to make it go everywhere.
Yeah, high enough to spray. And I think we had, so this might get a bit involved, I don't know. So what on a container ship is the engineers work day shifts. You work from 8 until 5. And then outside of those hours, you go into UMS, unmanned machinery space. So there's alarms and sensors on everything. And if something goes wrong, one of us will be on duty and you'll get an alarm on a panel in your cabin or on a pager, and you go and look at it. But it can't detect everything, like a tiny little fuel pipe coming off. Yeah. So we did have 2 CCTV cameras, but they went up to the bridge. And to be honest, people didn't really look at them. We had something that would detect a fire over the top of the main engine, an infrared fire detector. But again, there wasn't a fire at that point.
Yep.
And so whoever had been on duty had gone down and done their rounds at 2 or 3 in the morning. You go down halfway at night to check everything's okay. It was all good. And I was asleep at 7 a.m, give or take. Yeah. And the general alarm sounds, which is like the alarm that you've got to get out of bed and start doing things quickly. So we all run down to the engine control room, and the first engineer's down there. And he's like, there's fuel spraying across the top of the main engine. The exhaust is at the top of the main engine as well.
Okay.
Which is obviously hot. You've got the turbos as well. And we'd lost 2.5 tons, I think, of fuel via spraying like that. And it wasn't on fire, which was really positive.
Presumably it was sort of cooling and solidifying all over the floor and stuff as well.
Oh, it was. It was dripping down and making a hell of... But our immediate concerns were the fire potential.
Yeah.
So, we got 3 fire teams together to make sure that nothing was going to go wrong. So we had 2 of us in the engine room with the foam monitor just above the main engine. So if something we'd shut down the main engine at that point. If it did go on fire, we could just cover everything in foam. Right. The problem on that ship was the main engine room. The generators were in the same space as the main engine, so we'd lose pretty much all power immediately. And it didn't go on fire, thankfully. But it was that was a heartbreaking moment. Yeah.
And was that sort of under your watch, or were you part of a team, and so it's kind of shared responsibility? I guess
it's always. I mean, that's the thing on a container ship, 24 crew.
Yep.
And you're responsible for everything.
Okay.
Like fire, healthcare, mental well-being. Everything's a shared. You will get the odd person who doesn't, maybe share the load, but generally it's a shared thing.
Okay, very good. So container ships. A couple of stories by the sounds of it. Where did you go? What did you do next, and why?
So yeah, P&O Ned Lloyd got bought by Maersk, and I think two things really happened at that stage. The first thing was they banned drinking.
Right.
And
no more water for you.
So yeah, we went from, so we had an officers bar, you had a crew bar and officers bar on board, and you could buy beers in the evening, you could have a beer at dinner before, and then Maersk said no. Right. So apparently it was due to a high profile accident that involved alcohol. But the thing is that they just outright banned alcohol immediately. And what happened then was people who could be responsible stopped drinking. People who'd have 2-3 bottles of beer in an evening and stop were now the guys who weren't drinking. They were going to their cabins and watching films or whatever. The people who weren't responsible, the people who you'd have to tell to go to bed, because they had to be on duty in the morning, they didn't stop drinking.
Right.
They smuggled spirits stuff on board, and that pushed it underground. And yeah, it made that situation kind of untenable. It killed the social life on board. Like no one would sit in the bar playing games and stuff like that. And when you're away for 3 months at a time, like just watching films every night, there was no internet either back then. Right. It was literally borrowing DVDs from a library and watching them and playing crappy games on a laptop.
Okay.
So yeah, that kind of, that made it quite tough. But then Maersk started, and this is my opinion, just in case they're watching, they started squeezing budgets on everything from welfare to spares for the engines.
Right. Okay.
It just made work really unpleasant as well.
Yeah, interesting.
And loads of us quit. Like, I mean, I think I know about 10 people who quit within a month of each other, just saying, yeah, we don't want to work here anymore. Most of them still worked at sea after that. Many of them went offshore. But yeah, I thought I'd go and look for something else.
Okay.
Which wasn't the most interesting job. It was, well, mate, I liked it, but it was working in financial software in banks.
Right. Okay.
A small company. Yeah.
Okay. So you were there for a while, and I don't know if I'm getting the right impression. You maybe didn't enjoy it so much. It was a job more than anything else. Is that right? Or
I mean, so it was a small company, and I really liked helping the company grow, and I liked I liked working there, but it wasn't me.
It wasn't fulfilling you.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the first 3 years I worked there, I had a desk at one of the investment banks in the city of London, and I had to be in at 7 every morning to support the software. Like, if I wasn't in by 7 and something wasn't working, all hell broke loose. Back then I lived in Kensington, and even with that short commute, 45 minutes, you had to be out of bed at 5:30 in the morning every day, and it wears you down.
Not sure I could manage it.
People got really angry when things didn't work. I mean, they could lose big money. But that kind of stress wasn't what I needed. So I kind of ended up getting back into electronics, as a hobby.
Yeah.
Ended up hacking electronics in the security sense, and then gradually meandered into what I'm doing now, which is hacking electronic things.
Very cool. So can you talk more about that then? Because that's probably where most people know you from is the sort of the security side of things.
Yeah. So I work for a pen testing company. I lead the hardware team, or the weird stuff team there. We call ourselves the weird stuff team because we deal with like anything that's not a laptop or a server or a normal computer. Right. If it's an embedded system, if it's a car, a plane, a train, a crypto wallet, whatever it is, they're the kind of things we want to deal with. And it's good fun. The variety of jobs you get is just off the wall.
Yeah, I imagine.
Like, I'm working on a medical device at the moment. In 3 weeks' time, I'm going to be on a cruise ship.
Okay.
We've been on planes, cars, super yachts, crypto wallets,
Yeah.
normal mobile phones. It's a really varied job, and I think that's I guess a lot of people watching this, a lot of pen tests, a lot of people who like electronics, they do it because they want to learn. They want to have like something developing them, something new every day.
Mm-hmm.
And this gives that most of the time.
Okay.
Not all of the time, but most of the time.
Nice. So the dreaded or the inevitable, how did you get good at this kind of thing? It's sort of how did you get into the field question. Obviously you did things in your youth. You then later on started playing with Arduinos and things, I think, and sort of got back into the electronics. Did you join the company as sort of a I don't know what to call it, but a novice-ish kind of level, and you've kind of grown since then, or how did that kind of thing go?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. So I guess when I was at secondary school, I mean, even when I was at primary school, I was the computer kid. It was BBC back then. If they didn't work, they'd come and find me to get them working.
Yeah.
And when we went to secondary school, that was kind of, they had a few 386s in my first year at secondary, or lower first. But they moved on to 486s with a 10 base T network.
Okay.
So it was networked computers.
Amazing.
And that led to us messing about with them. Obviously, when you realised you could start doing was it
NetSend and NetSend? Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, you could do NetSend, and then when they got CD drives, we worked out how you could make them all eject at exactly the same time, and there was all that kind of stuff like that, and we started messing about with those. When you're a kid and you're doing stuff at school, you've always got that safety net of the first layer of punishment is going to be the school. It's really rare you do something at school where they're going to call the police. So you can hack into schools' computers and you'll get in trouble, but you're not going to get arrested.
Yeah. And you're a kid. So that helps too.
Can maybe fudge the stored value card system that you pay for school dinners and in the vending without getting arrested. And you learn a lot by doing that. And I was into phreaking as well, so phone hacking, blue boxing, stuff like that. I mean, I don't know why it was so unfulfilling. Like you could make free calls via Trinidad and Tobago. Why am I doing this? Like a really delayed call to someone who is sat the other side of the room from me. It's just like, why? But yeah, you use those years to do things that maybe you wouldn't get away with later.
Yeah, we got someone else that looks like they're enjoying it as well. Remembering NetBIOS. Hi, Oversoft.
Yeah. So many weird protocols. If I had the level of understanding I do now about computers and I could apply it back then, it would have been just disastrous, to be honest.
Yeah, I can relate to that one.
Yeah. So they were fun years, and it was the same. We did a lot of urban exploration. Again, this is meandering all over the place.
Right.
That kind of started off. I grew up at a mental hospital before I grew up at a school.
Okay.
So from the ages of maybe 2 until 9, both my parents worked at Cane Hill Mental Hospital, which is a very, very big mental hospital. It used to be called an asylum in South London. So we lived in various places around it, cottages down at the front, then the gatehouse for a bit. And I just remember, like, many of my younger years were running around a mental asylum. A little bit strange. But it shut down. It closed. And it was this huge building. And it became this kind of weird urban exploration mecca. And we used to spend nights and days exploring the place. Like, it was really interesting. So many like remnants of the people who'd been there. Like, it was an art room, a room full of like paintings that people who'd been there had done, and there were the tunnels, the boiler house, the tower, all these crazy things. And that was where my urban exploration stuff started, and we kept on pushing that further and further. And that I'm not going to say, I mean, that's quite useful, sneaking into buildings without getting caught is quite a useful skill when now a little chunk of my job is sneaking into buildings without getting caught.
Nice. Okay, so a lot of this has come with you from young age then, and personally speaking, I find a lot of it sort of a way of thinking, a way you approach problems is a large part of why and how people do this kind of work. Is that similar for you?
Yeah, I think that yeah, I think it is. I mean, so I think I've got quite an active brain. I like analyzing problems. I like trying to work out all the different paths that can be covered. And I think that's when you're testing something for security vulnerabilities, when you're trying to work out how to get into a building, you don't want to just follow the obvious route. Like I think when you watch, say, heist films and things like that, they always just know exactly what to do. There's no decision tree that they make when they're trying to go into that building. You know, they don't plan for when it's going to go wrong. They don't work out all the different ways you can do things.
I just happen to have this map of the building and look in here. There's a route planned out for us, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think analyzing problems and working out the maybe not the best way of solving them. I mean, that's the thing. You're not always looking to solve them. You're looking to explore them. You're looking to find out.
I think explore is such a good word for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think trying to think of the way of describing this, you don't want to constrain yourself to thinking that there's one path to success. Like I know that you get these Twitter threads where these people who've succeeded
do this.
These are my 12 tips, or 11. Was it 11 tips like 3 months ago? Here are my 11 tips to success. And you're like, well, yeah, but like you don't have to do that. You could do another million things there. Let's explore all of them and kind of understand what they are. And I think, that's it. It's an important thing to do when you're looking at any problem. Yeah,
nice. So I think we've kind of now got to where you are today and who you are today. And maybe Oversoft will be a bit unhappy that we haven't spoken about a particular topic.
Oh, God.
Anything you'd like to add?
Oh, the butt plugs. Here we go. Right, first off, I'd like to give a shout out to Alex, my colleague, who is actually the person who did the butt plug work.
Okay.
Wasn't me. I was just the person again who was just shouting about it on the internet. You know, that was kind of the thing that happened there. I mean, I did blow up the butt plug on stage at B-Sides. I don't know if it was Glasgow. Yeah, it was B-Sides Glasgow where we blew up the butt plug by.
Missed that one. Okay.
But the butt plug stuff. Like we did some work on the security of internet connected sex toys, which are butt plugs, Lovents, who've now got a mind-boggling range of different things. The weirdest one. I'm allowed to be a little bit NSFW here.
Oh, I think so. Try and keep it quite clean, but go for it.
The weirdest one was a camera dildo, which was quite strange. And the thing was, we kind of started looking at these maybe a little bit jokingly. You know, they're kind of amusing things to look at. And then we realised that like there's serious privacy implications. Like you could work out. I mean, one of the things we looked at a male chastity cage. You could stop them from. You could prevent people from unlocking them. You could geolocate the people using them.
Wow. Okay.
And like that's quite a private thing. You know, you don't want everybody. You don't want your colleagues knowing that's what you're into. You don't want your government knowing that's what you're into. If you're in Iran or a repressive country, you know, it's kind of. We realize there's maybe a bit of a dark side to this kind of stuff. But yeah,
as a user, that kind of thing is so difficult. Not just with this kind of stuff, but with all products. You know, if you are a user who doesn't know or understand, or even who does know and understand this kind of technology, you know, being aware of what could be happening behind the scenes that isn't secured, and you know, the potential there is actually something that I find quite concerning.
I think you've made a good point there. Like, I think so. I think the majority of people in the UK now have a voice assistant in the house. And then that's a Google, whatever it's called now. They've probably canned it by now. But, you know, there's lots of voice assistants.
Yeah.
about. And to be honest, if you look at Amazon products, their security is really quite good. Secure boot, signed firmware updates, no network stuff exposed, everything's encrypted. They're really quite solid from a hacker. But I don't think you have to worry about the security from a random hacker. It's privacy from Amazon you've got to worry about. All of that data being gathered. I mean,
there are things like the Ring doorbells where they've been submitting footage to the police, I think, and you know, what else is going on?
Yeah, like how's that information being shared? I mean, like I separated from a partner a while back, and I found it really difficult making sure that they couldn't access devices in my house. Literally, Alexa. Like how, like Amazon just didn't give me the tools to work out who could be logged into that device and see what's on there. Like, because you've got a Spotify account that was shared at some point. You've got all these different things. How can people tell what's going on with those?
Yeah, interesting.
Like, I know what I'm doing. And I was going through pages of settings, and then I was just like, oh, look, I'll just bin it and buy a new one. Pair that. Yeah.
Oh, dear. Okay, so shall we talk a bit about the physical security stuff, the breaking into buildings and whatever else comes with it?
So it's an interesting one.
Love to hear about it. Yeah.
So we do what are called red teams, which the terminology US to UK is a bit different, but the goal is we want to gain access to some assets at a company. And nowadays, phishing protection, perimeter security is really good on most businesses. Network perimeter security is really good. So one of the things we'll do is what we call physical access jobs, where we try to gain physical access to a site. So that might be an office, it might be a power station, it might be a control room or something like that. It depends, it varies. And that's one of the things that I do. So I do that along with, there's a few of us that do that. And we've all got different styles, we do things different ways. But yeah, we essentially, I mean, I've said it on Twitter, we're crappy James Bonds. You know, you're getting into a building, the idea is you don't get caught. Normally what we're doing, and I showed you this earlier, we're trying to place this little thing. It's called a Dropbox. It's literally a little computer. We connect it to their network, and it allows us remote access to their network. It gives us that initial foothold that will allow us to do worse things.
So for your customers, clients, is that generally the goal, is to get access to their network, or is it sometimes to get access to a room or a location inside the building?
It depends. So we have longer red team engagements where they will want us to say be able to get access to something much further down the chain. So this will be step one of doing that. Other times they will want us to. I mean, I've been asked to literally leave a note on the desk of someone, a post.
That's the sort of thing I was thinking. Yeah,
there, like the little flag. So it depends really, and I think it changes the way you feel about a job as well. If you're doing it as part of a longer engagement, you don't want to get caught. You don't want people to be alerted, because if we do get caught during a red team, during the physical access bit, we tend to get given what's called a leg up. They won't stop the engagement at that point. They'll say, right, you've been caught, but you can now place the Dropbox. But the problem is people then know. People are aware that something's happened, and it's not just going to be a small group of people. It'll be 10 people. Gossip happens, and then things are not realistic.
Okay. And I imagine, you know, I'm not really in this area, so I can't talk from experience myself, but I imagine that you would be engaged by a select few people in the company who know that something's going to happen, and everyone else is effectively unaware. To make it a fair test.
So the way it seems to work at most big companies is there will be maybe 10 people or something like that can request an engagement like this. But only one or two of them will be aware the engagement's happening. So another chunk of them that can request one aren't going to be aware at that time. Make sure it's realistic.
And I guess part of that is then the authority to make that request. And how do you cover yourselves legally and all that kind of thing? That someone in the company supposedly has asked you to come in, but that's probably a big question.
It's a really interesting question, that actually, because we've had issues before where we've been concerned that we've been asked to do something that's not completely above board. So sometimes when you get hired to do a job, you're not being paid by the company that's requested you do the job. You know, you look at where the PO and everything, all that, and you're like, well, hold on, this doesn't make any sense. So you do need to do due diligence on the people to make sure you're being asked to do something reasonable. You know, it would tend to be we'd only do this kind of work for established clients.
Right.
I mean, from a threat modeling perspective as well, most companies aren't subject to physical access issues. You know, you're not going to worry about a hacker coming along and putting a Dropbox in if you're a company with 10 employees.
Right.
That's so we tend to focus on the bigger companies, and they come to us with a long established relationship, so we know that person is asking us genuinely.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, a quick question from Oversoft again about the Dropboxes. Are they just a 4G, 5G Raspberry Pi or similar that you would drop and connect up?
Yeah, pretty much. This is actually an Odroid, just because this one's a bit old, but the old Raspberry Pis were a bit slow, especially doing certain stuff like that. Yeah, they were just a bit of a pain. I mean, yeah, it's essentially a single board computer with 4 or 5G. It will have a script on it that tries to go out via the Ethernet connection. You've got Wi-Fi, you've got 4G. We did used to put a 2G fallback on them as well. In the UK, we've still got 2G, and you can use that as a. I mean, we're talking like single character typing kind of thing. If you've lost it, I mean, oh god. So, can I tell a story about putting one
Please
of these
do.
in?
Yeah, please do.
So, we had one of these, and our target was a company in London, FTSE 500, big company, and my first access attempt to put it in was essentially this is gonna meander as well. One of our things we do is when we want to target a building, we look for the floor plans. And if you've built a building in London, if you've built a building in the UK, pretty much you can get the floor plans. And I noticed that the front entrance didn't have any speed gates, you know, the access gates that were disabled. It could let a disabled person through, a person in a wheelchair rather,
right.
And they weren't wide enough. So what I did was I looked through all the documentation. I found the architecture company that designed the building, and I fabricated an email chain and got in contact with the facilities manager and said, we need to come in and we need to adjust your speed gates to allow a wheelchair through. We're going to need to take some measurements, make sure everything makes sense. And essentially they said, yeah, come in and do that. So I turned up. My persona that day was I was a newly qualified chartered surveyor.
Okay.
And I had a loads of measure and a tape measure and stuff like that. And I did the survey. But I also had to go and look at all the access control equipment to make sure we could modify it to put the new gate in. But I didn't know about any of that, so I was taking photos in there. And but yeah,
the excuse of newly qualified probably gave you a lot of leeway there.
It's a great one. It's a great one. Saying you're newly qualified, like you come up with backstories, you develop them in your head. It was when Westfield was being built as well. So I was at Westfield earlier that day, and it was really cold. And so I was playing up the whole I'm really tired and cold thing. So they got me a cup of tea so I could sit down in the office and stuff. You know, you can do stuff like that. But they kind of escorted me everywhere. So that wasn't ideal. So I went to sit down on the wrong side of the barriers, and I was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get in? And I thought the receptionist was really friendly. What happens if I go and ask her if I can print a document for my next job? I need a bit of paper printed for my next job. Would she do that for me and leave the desk unattended? So I went to her and I said, I need this document printed. I can email it to you.
Yep.
So I emailed her the document, which was just some work permit order I'd downloaded off Google 3 minutes.
Nice. I was going to say, having to prepare that as well, that's sort of a bit.
Yeah, if she'd looked at it, it did not make sense. But she left the desk, and they had prepared visitors cards behind the counter. You know, receptionists do that. If someone's booked in, they'll have the name, the post-it note on the card. So I stole two of them.
Okay.
And while she was gone, put them in my pocket. And at that point, I've got 2 cards that let me through the gates.
Nice.
So that was a long story. I went and placed the Dropbox. It was easy. I went up to the 6th floor, went into a meeting room. Underneath one of the floor plates, there was a network socket. I plugged it in, checked with my colleague on the phone that he had access to it, and it was all good. I left the site. Job done. Thing was, 3 days later, he was working on the Dropbox, and he managed to drop the network interfaces on it. So by changing the routes on it, he prevented all access to it entirely. And at that point in time, we didn't have a script on it to reset. Nowadays, we have a thing that tries pinging several addresses, and if you don't get them, it goes back to a state.
Live and learn.
Live and learn, yep. So yeah, the problem was now we had a dead Dropbox on the site. Wow, this is getting a long story. So I had to go back. What I'd learned on my previous visit was their Christmas party was happening on Friday, the 14th of December or whatever.
Okay.
I thought, a Christmas party.
Perfect.
And it was in the building, on the insecure side of the speed gates, in the kind of like canteen area. I thought this sounds ideal. So I rock up at 3 p.m. I was dressed as an employee of that company, and I was just sat in that area working on my laptop. And the party started, they started getting a PA in and a band and stuff like that. It was all very big. And then the alcohol started coming out and everybody started drinking. And then the scariest moment of my entire career, I pickpocketed a pass off someone.
Ooh,
I could see it in her pocket, and I'm like, I can do this. So I went and swiped her card, and that was it. I was like, I'm going. And I'm straight upstairs, reset the Dropbox, went back down to the unisex toilets and just put the ID card and lanyard back on the side of a sink. So that it looked like someone had just left it there by mistake and left the building. But yeah, that's got to go down as one of the most, twice into a building.
Very nice.
2 weeks. Yeah, it was
I imagine those guest posts you grabbed earlier, no good after the end of the day or something.
They were deactivated at the end of the day. Yeah, not always the case. We recently did a critical national infrastructure company got a guest pass, and it worked for 3-4 days after that.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
nice. So in terms of your engagements with this kind of project, OSINT, or however you want to pronounce it, is probably quite a big thing.
Yeah.
And scoping out sort of your plans of how to get in, how to approach the problem. And you mentioned earlier floor plans and stuff. I imagine this is all a big set of preparation that you spend a lot of time in. Can you talk a bit about that? Yeah,
sure. So, I mean, one of the key things here is you want to build up as complete a picture as possible. Every little bit of information can build up something more and more that lets you become a person that's believable in that building. So it can be something like a promotional video on YouTube that the company produces that makes you realize the style of the ID cards they use. Or do the staff lanyards say staff on them, or do they have the company logo on them? What kind of clothing do people wear? You can call up and say you need to deliver a large piece of furniture. How's that delivered to the company? Like, does it come in through a loading bay somewhere? How's the security of that arranged? You've got to get something signed for by someone on a particular floor. It's a legal document. Can you go up to the floor? You can kind of make all these inquiries. The floor plans as well. So planning permission in the UK, if you Google planning portal for whichever council, you'll generally be able to find documents that show floor plans, which can show you stairwells, lifts, speed gates. In a particularly bad bit of security advice a few years ago in London, you used to have to submit your CCTV cameras and door access control details as part of your application, so you could see where all the cameras were. It was like, this is a really bad idea. So you start building up pictures like that. There's other things, like if you can work out who the facilities management company is. I mean, I remember going into a building where I'd literally bought a clipboard in Rylands and I stuck a sticker I'd printed onto it that was the logo of the building management company. Like, it was a sticker. That was it. And when I was doing the debrief, the building manager, the person who worked in that individual building, was like, "Where'd you get that clipboard from?" Like,
it's 50p.
Sticker on it. That's all it is. convincers,
Amazing.
them, little bits of information that convince people. So
Yeah.
working out commercial relationships, can you call up and claim to be from another company that they already work with? One place I got into, they had a particularly advanced fire extinguishing system in their server room, and I said that there was a problem with the power supplies in them that stopped them working. I was from a company that serviced them. They gave me an invite into the building. Knowing other companies in that same building, I mean, most of the work we do is in London, so you get shared tenancy. So you've got 20 floors of a building. One, two, three floors of the target client. But if they've got a WeWork office or another shared office on another floor, or somewhere you can get invited into, you might have a guest pass that sometimes works on other floors. So you build up all of this information, and simple things. One of the things I like going and doing is, and it's maybe crossing the lines between OSINT and INT, is you can go and sit in the reception of most buildings saying you're waiting for a friend you're going to go for a drink or whatever, or go for dinner, and you're just waiting for a friend, and you can sit in the reception area.
Okay.
And you can watch what people are doing. Yeah. How do people book into reception? How do people leave the building? What kind of clothes are they wearing? What lanyards are they wearing? I mean, simple things like speed gates. Some buildings you need a pass to go in and out. Other ones you can just walk out. It makes a difference to when you're trying to leave a building if you suddenly realise that you've been busted and you can't
know what you're trying to do. Exactly.
Yeah. So
nice.
You're building up a complete picture, loads and loads of information. I mean, one of the things I try to shy away from is people overshare on the internet. I'm almost certainly but I mean, again, employees will share information that they're really not meant to share. I mean, it's one of the absolutely key things. We never want to blame an individual for the failure. I mean, I can see like completely outright failures where someone does do something awful. We haven't had one. It's always process or technical failure. It's never one individual that's messed something up. And so you don't want to blame a single person.
That's actually something I was going to talk on a bit later. Is the I don't want to call it blame culture, but the way issues are handled. So within aviation, for example, it's very much a matter of what are the facts, what happened, how do we fix it?
Yeah.
And within other industries, it's more of a sort of a who can I blame to save myself almost. So that's perhaps something we can talk about in a minute. But yeah, very interesting.
But yeah, sorry, go
carry on. No,
they're great fun jobs. I love doing them. They're kind of stressful. I mean, some of the stuff we've done is just ridiculous.
I was mentioning Piss Corridor on Twitter earlier. That was
the Piss Corridor, which was literally I mean, I think if you Google Piss Corridor Cybergivens, you'll probably get a better story than I can tell. It's literally a passageway down the back of toilets that means you can get from an insecure location to a secure one.
Yeah.
I was with another colleague where there's one of those ventilation panels on the bottom of a door leading to some servers. And in front of an office, we unscrewed the ventilation panel in the bottom of the door. Both of us were wearing suits as well. So we weren't like workmen.
Not even with high vis.
We climbed through the bottom of the door into the server room. And loads of people saw it and they were just like, this is one of the key things is if you see something weird happening, it's not obviously really, really bad. Quite often people are just like, well, I just want a nice day. I don't want to fight. They can't be doing that wanting a fight, so I'm just going to sit at my desk and watch them do it. So it's amazing what you can do when you think you can get away with it.
Yeah, you got to have that confidence as well. As soon as you sort of start doubting yourself, I guess it probably falls apart, doesn't it?
Yeah, confidence is quite a bit of it. I think there's quite a lot of mental prep. I mean, we all talk about this. You get a crash after these jobs. When you leave the site, you're quite often sat on the tube or train or whatever, and you literally fall asleep. Like it's maybe not your heart rate or stress in particular. Like the mental load can just be so high that you come out of it and you're just like, I'm done.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Nice. So I think the next topic we'd like to talk about is sort of comparing different industries, and this touches on the blame that I was talking about just now. So you've got the embedded world where a lot of the time it's sort of a fairly insignificant thing that does something. Then you've got
Yeah.
cars, planes, ships, etc. You happy to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think when we look at all these different systems, they're fundamentally quite similar. They're little boxes talking to other little boxes and trying to do something interesting. When you move, it's when things become cyber physical, moving things, heating things, pumping things, that stuff starts getting a little bit scarier, in my opinion. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, the different industries are quite interesting. I mean, if we look to IoT, it's like the Wild West. People do what they want.
Such a young space, isn't it? Still,
such a young space, and there's virtually no regulation at the moment. It's so out there. You can just develop a product that's awful, push it to the market, and then
zero support. Yeah,
zero support. Yeah, exactly. And then cars, planes, trains, ships. They're all quite interesting. The way they get built and developed is quite different. You look at a car, and I mean, Henry Ford was probably the first proponent of mass production at huge scale. He wanted everything coming out of the factory to be exactly the same, and they're still doing that today. Every car manufacturer wants every car to be the same. The differences are inconsequential, especially in the security terms. Everything should have the same firmware, the same wiring, the same connections. So that means that you do a security test of one car, and ideally it should cover over to all the other cars. There's not going to be a different Ethernet cable on that other car that left the factory.
Within a model.
Within a model, yeah. Good point. Yeah, things are not always perfect. When you move to planes, everything is so tightly regulated. If you want a single extra cable, if you want to update the firmware on something, all of that's got to go through approval. So everything's absolutely tightly controlled. You know, there's no way that you can end up with a switch or a router that a third party's installed on a plane that you didn't know about.
Right.
I hope. It's challenging.
That's the plan. Yeah.
You move on to a ship, and I'm thinking about, like, we've worked on some of the bigger cruise ships, and there might be 40 different third parties involved with installing systems on that ship. They run off a converged core network, so there's a core network that connects everything together. But patching into that, how that's connected, what you do on that, is kind of those third parties' choices. I mean, we found hidden modems, we found boxes that have got TeamViewer running on them, connecting to the internet, and the company's not been paying for them anymore. Patch cables that someone's put in to make something work. Sometimes a ship will only be in port for 8 hours, which means that if you're a contractor getting on board to fix something, you've got to get it working in 8 hours, and you'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like a plane where if it's not, it's in it being fixed, you can just say no, it's not leaving. With the ship, they're like, we're going, whatever. So you end up, ships are just. We've seen 2 ships that should be identical be significantly different.
Wow.
I think they're, from a network perspective, the most complex things we've ever looked at. I mean, 3,000 CCTV cameras.
That's massive.
Yeah, 2,000.
Bigger than most buildings, I would imagine. You know, it's small neighborhood type territory, I guess.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff, and I just don't see how they make them. You know, if they made them like an aeroplane, they wouldn't get built.
That's the thing, isn't
it? Aeroplanes and ships have got different safety criteria. You know, a plane's got a very immediate need to not stop. A ship, if it stops, if the engines stop, it's all right for a few minutes. You're not going to be
floating.
most of the time. So yeah, it's interesting looking at the different perspectives and seeing how people handle it differently.
And I imagine that during your engagements as well, it's the mindset that you put on and you actually have with your customers and they have is going to be very different as well. You know, there's on a ship, it's sort of, what's that cable? I don't know. That's one of life's mysteries. Whereas on a plane, you know, what's that cable? I don't know. Well, there's something wrong here. You know, it's an immediate.
Yeah, I mean it is. If we found a cable on a plane that wasn't meant to be there, or we found a backdoor account on a car, you know, things are going to get serious. Whereas on a ship, there's not really that kind of method to kind of like pass that up the chain. It's just like, oh, we found a problem, let's immediately fix it by unplugging that box, or let's mitigate it by adding some other controls. And there's very little investigation or kind of like root cause. I mean, it's kind of hard to discuss without leaking stuff about clients, but we've tested multiple ships in the same series of ships.
This was going to be, I think you're touching on my next question, which was, if you test a car or a plane and they're quite well regulated, and you find a problem, you say, this is a problem, here's maybe how to fix it, or kind of hint them in the right direction. They can then deploy that across the fleet. On a ship, that sounds like that's not a thing you can do. It's almost like you have to review each individual ship.
Yeah, which is a challenge. Pen testing is not cheap at all, especially when you're talking like ships and cars, like limited resource pool at the moment. So it does get difficult. I mean, this is the thing. If there's a problem found in a production line of a car, it gets fixed at a high level and then passed down as very, very clear instructions to that end person, or a robot even. It could be that extreme. If there's a problem in a plane, that so much happens. If something in a plane unexpected happens, whether it's like a crack appearing in a wing spar or something like that, the amount of paperwork, the amount of work that's involved that gets passed down, that all involves paperwork going back up the chain, is huge. Whereas on a ship, I mean, one ship we found that one of the remote switches had been left with a default password on it. A big switch had been left with a default password on it, and it allowed a significant compromise. The thing is that I don't think that went up the chain at all. I think someone was looked at the issue and was like, oh, yep, they did some really bad stuff with that default password. But then it was the company that they don't even own the ship.
Right.
Their name is on the ship, but someone else actually owns the ship. It's operated by another company. It was built by a shipyard who contracted another company who used a particular fitter to go and put that device in. And there's it doesn't pass back down again. There's none of that regulation. There's none of that paperwork. And it's just,
very interesting.
Don't see how you can change it so easily.
Very good. We're coming up to sort of the hour mark. Are you happy to carry on a bit? We've got a couple more topics. I don't want to push you if you're needing to get off.
No.
The next thing might be worth or fun to talk about is Bitfi and the saga that was there. How that came about, what happened, and how it went down, that kind of thing. If you're happy to.
Yeah, sure. So to anyone who doesn't know what Bitfi was it was a crypto wallet, and Oversoft's listening. It was a crypto wallet, and essentially it claimed that it never held the keys to store your cryptocurrency. So if it never held your keys, the keys can be compromised, and if that was the case, it was completely secure. And they had a bug bounty, or a bounty. If you could get the keys off a wallet they sent you, then you could claim this bounty. And it looked interesting to us. We didn't really understand what it was doing.
Just before we get much further, was this you as an individual, as a hobby, or was this you in a sort of professional sense?
So, right, this kind of a complex.
Blurs the lines.
Oversoft. If you're listening still, Thick Magascal. What did it stand for?
And how is it spelled?
Yeah, exactly. The Hacker Collective. Anyway, but yes. Yeah. So, it started off with a few colleagues, and then a few tweets happened, and then other people kind of got involved. It involves cryptocurrencies. Involved John McAfee, so it was kind of like, there was a lot of attention, and as a result, a group of different people got involved. So, I mean, probably the most prominent person was Salim Spodoir, who was the guy who actually developed the outright attack that destroyed it. But there was loads of the rest of us looking at different things, doing different things. I don't want to downplay what anybody did, and. But we bought some of the wallets and we started looking at them. And the idea was the keys were never stored on them.
I think big part of the key thing was the whole brain wallet concept as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so brain wallet is the idea that you type a phrase or something in that you know, and it turns it from that phrase into your cryptocurrency keys. That means that your cryptocurrency keys can be used to do whatever with your funds. And that really just, brain wallets have got problems for a start. But then the BitFi, we were just like, it doesn't add up. Like, we could break this. And fundamentally, the way we broke it was the keys have got to exist on the wallet. If you type a phrase in, the keys exist at some point. And what Salim did was he performed a cold boot attack. You reboot the phone. I mean, the BitFi. It was an Android phone. You reboot it. You recover the memory from it, and the keys are in there. It was as simple as that. It was a very good attack that he developed, but it was a simple conceptual attack. But I think the thing that was interesting was how they were really aggressive about it, and I think in turn, I was quite aggressive back as well. Like there was a lot of social media battles. I mean, I don't know how many followers I've got on Twitter, but I think more than half of them came from the BitFi thing. The tweets were getting so many likes.
Yeah.
McAfee was just like getting involved, and
fuel.
Yeah, he told me my career was over in a DM. I should go back and get screenshots of that. But yeah, it was just, it got so heated.
So for me, one of the really interesting things was them putting out this statement that was technically impossible.
Yeah.
Not just incorrect. That cannot be true.
Yeah.
And standing by it, never backing down. And I think that's perhaps from outside observers' point of view, that's perhaps what made it get to such a high profile sort of case project, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was the fact that they just kept on denying everything.
Yeah.
It was like, this isn't possible, they're cheating. And I think to pretty much anyone technical, after maybe a few days of this, they suddenly realized that it doesn't matter what they're saying. It's clearly not true. Even if we hadn't developed the cold boot attack, the keys exist at some point. Yeah, and it was just such a weird experience.
Yeah, that whole thing comes back to communication and users or people's knowledge level, I guess is what you'd call it. If you are saying something that sounds reasonable, people who don't know the details of the technology are going to just accept it. And that's another fascinating thing from my point of view is how you accurately communicate your ideas, your plans, what's actually happening.
I think it's a good point. That I think quite a few times we've found situations where it is the way that a company's communicated an idea has maybe been technically incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll be completely honest. The concept of the BitFi isn't terrible. I mean, the original one was terribly implemented, but the idea of typing something in every single time, it's not the worst idea in the world. But they went so extreme with what that idea could do for you that their claims became unrealistic. And I mean, we've seen it. I probably don't want to go into what 3 words, but they've kind of done the same thing. They made a claim.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you made a mistake, it would be on the other side of the world. It'd be so obvious, and then it turned out it wasn't. And I don't know if you remember the nursery cam thing that happened maybe 18 months ago, or whatever. Again, they had all these diagrams of how everything's perfectly secure and stuff like that. And fundamentally, every parent was logging into a DVR with admin credentials that were the same across all of the individual nurseries. And it's like people just take things to such an extent, but then how do you communicate that to users? I mean, we get asked to do pen tests of devices, then provide an executive summary that can be customer or client facing.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, how do you really do that? How do you, in a page of information, explain to someone what the risks are, how
make
they
it accessible and easy to understand, and all these things,
and discuss threat model as well. Like, I mean, if I went downstairs, I could probably get root access on my router within an hour. But I don't take my router out of my house. My phone, hopefully I can drop it in the street and a normal person's not going to be able to get root access to it. And I think people don't really sit down and think about threat models and how things can impact us. I mean, it's the same with them. We've seen it with vehicles and tracking devices. A car, it's quite often possible. No, it's possible, potentially possible, to listen to the occupants of a vehicle. There's microphones inside most cars nowadays for call and things like that. For me, in an Uber or whatever, is that a problem that someone's listening to me? I'm not going to be talking to an Uber driver about something sensitive. But if it's the Prime Minister, it suddenly becomes a problem. If you can track where a vehicle is, again, for me, if I'm in a vehicle, it's probably not a problem if someone knows where it is. If you've just left an abusive relationship, though, you probably don't want the other person to know where you are. And I don't think it's easy to communicate these things in a single page of text.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, fascinating. Anyway, so I think the last topic then, which was partly related to Bitfy and how that got overblown or blew up or whatever you want to call it, was about how to approach disclosure of vulnerabilities. And we've talked about it just now in terms of communicating what went wrong effectively or what was a problem. But how do you what steps do you take in terms of, I found something that's a problem, what's next?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think my approach and my company's approach has matured a lot over the years. We see it from both sides of the fence now as well. So we provide advice to companies who get disclosures come through. And I think it can be easy for people to end up combative on disclosures. You see it on HackerOne, definitely. People end up, but there's monetary reward there. So first off, for the most part, we don't engage in bug bounties. We disclose outside of those.
Right.
It's generally not the financial gains you get through that are generally not worthwhile for a company. For individuals, sometimes yes. But I think the perception of risk on both sides of the fence is always going to differ, and that can be for different reasons. I mean, we always say this when we're dealing with clients, that they know their business better than we do. We're security consultants. We're not marine engineers. We're not traders. Whoever we're working with. So they know their business better than us, and I think that's really important to note. When you're disclosing something, there might be something you're missing. You might not understand the full picture. I mean, the big one that I've seen, and I might as well completely call it out, is that people attack a crappy CCTV camera, cloud connected camera, and they route it, but it either needed physical access or it needed adjacent network access to be inside the person's home. In 99% of deployments, it will be behind a firewall. It's not, you haven't got an internet connected vulnerability. There's no way to compromise all of the cloud cameras. And quite often in disclosure, the scale of how many people are impacted is just not really kind of discussed.
Okay, that's interesting.
So I mean, we compromised the camera platform years ago, and it was literally 100,000 cameras, being able to view them over the cloud.
That's terrifying. Yeah.
In the same camera locally, yeah, come on, it's a little bit different. Like, yes, it's a problem, but we need to keep these risks in proportion. And I don't think that's always communicated well during disclosure. The local versus remote attack. I think one of the important things is to just remember that fundamentally you're trying to improve security. Like, it can be so easy to end up with it becoming a battle. And I think you need to look at it from the other perspective as well, especially for like mid or small sized companies. A bad disclosure, a serious vulnerability, and maybe your only product can generate serious negative press. And I think from a security researcher's perspective, you've got to bear that in mind. Maybe give them a little bit longer, maybe give them a bit of leeway,
And if they're responsive to you as well, if they take your report and look like they're doing something sensible.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But then that's a big problem we find. A lot of small companies, there is no one to deal with these kind of things. There is an individual person you can contact. I mean, just recently, a colleague disclosed an issue in an embedded device a long time ago now, maybe a year ago, and they got back in touch with us, and they were like, "Yeah, the guy responding to you was a support guy. He didn't know how to handle it."
And
we're like, "Yeah, you kind of you should have reached that stage of maturity where you know how to handle these things, you know when to pass it up the chain." But companies need to learn. They need to have a process. They need to have someone to come in and say vulnerability disclosure is a real thing. I mean, we've disclosed to companies before, and they haven't understood what responsible disclosure is. Like, we've had to literally point them to Wikipedia to say this isn't just a term we've made up, and we've been accused of blackmail before.
Yes, yeah.
No, we're not saying we don't want work from you. We just want you to fix the issue.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting. It's where security meets human interaction, and it's always going to be difficult, I think.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Very good. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered yet in the last few minutes?
I think that's been a really good range of subjects, to be honest.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's as you say, it's been really interesting. Thank you for talking about everything. Next week we'll be talking with Carrie Sundra from Alpenglow Industries. But for now, that's goodbye from us.
Thank you.